So a slightly different video today because I want to talk about Homer's Odyssey, which is one of course, the most epic and classic texts, narratives. It's a poem, actually, and it's one of humanity's greatest relics, right? It's 2,800 years old, and it tells stories of things that happened supposedly 3,300 years ago into the past. So I got into the Odyssey because I really wanted to drink from the well of humanity's greatest legacies and understand what is the archetypal or the narrative blueprint that these legends and myths still carry with us down until today. And the more I read, actually, the Odyssey, the more I see that I think it's impossible if you're writing a modern science fiction or a fantasy novel or any book or film that is based on a quest or a journey of kind of voyage and return. It's almost impossible to create episodes that are not somehow influenced by Homer and the tales of Odysseus. So it's so rich walking through this ancient literary world. And the other thing that I love about reading the Odyssey actually is it's the complete antidote to TikTok culture and shorts and the way that our attention spans are compressed into the minute. Watching material often that is going to be expired or useless in a week's time, but instead, how can I immerse myself in a text that's thousands of years old and still brings me wisdom today? And I'm getting wisdom from the Odyssey, and I'm going to share here a couple of things that have surfaced in my coaching and my leadership program over the last year. So I think we should have a little bit of background. Homer's Odyssey is all about Odysseus, who is a cunning and fantastic, strong, brave warrior. He's also the king of the island of Ithaca, and he's married to Penelope, and they have their son Telemachus. And Ithaca is an island on one side of Greece, but Odysseus goes off to the Trojan War, which lasts for 10 long years. And on the way back from the Trojan War, he's cursed by the gods and has to spend another 10 years sailing around the Mediterranean trying to find his way home. So there's 20 years in which the brave and wily Odysseus is away from Penelope and Telemachus. And the famous aspect of the Odyssey is you're tracking Odysseus's story back. And there are all these really classic episodes that happen to him, like him and his men are trapped in the island of the Cyclops. The Cyclops is this giant flesh-eating monster, and Homer comes up behind him at one point with his spear and gets the Cyclops in his only eye, renders him blind, and that way he can take his men to safety. So great heroism. We've seen that trope kind of mirrored a million times in modern films. And one of the other famous stories of Odysseus is about the sirens. So the sirens are these alluring kind of mermaid type characters, and they sit on the rocks, and their song is so beautiful that every seaman that ever passes the sirens is enchanted by this song and the beauty of the sirens, that he just craves and longs to be with them and have them, that he sails up to the rocks where the sirens are sat and is smashed to death. And every single man, it's said, that ever heard the siren's song was so enchanted that he tried to approach the sirens and was smashed to his death. So Odysseus, he asked his brothers, his comrades, to bind him to the mast so he can hear the siren's song. He wants the experience of knowing what beauty is like. He wants the direct experience of hearing the sirens. So he gets his brothers to bind him to the mast so he can hear them, but he can't actually get free. And that's the only way that he could be the first man in history to hear the sirens call without actually dying afterwards. And his fellow men, they put wax in their ears and they keep rowing, even though Odysseus passes the sirens and he enjoys the call. He tries to get free and he can't. And interestingly, what happens to the sirens, as soon as the sirens meet a man who hears their call but has the restraint not to smash himself up in the rocks to try and get them, the sirens can't bear the heartbreak or the power shift of that, and the sirens will actually kill themselves straight afterwards. So interesting insights into nature of the siren, some aspect to the masculine, some aspect to the feminine, restraint. So that's Odysseus, but I'm at the start of the book right now. I've read the first 4 chapters, there's 24 in total. And you don't start with Odysseus, you actually start with Telemachus, who's the only son. And what's happened in the years that Odysseus was away is that Penelope's at home with her very young child, and you've got this beautiful, wise, intelligent queen with her palace and her only son and slaves and so on. And she is waiting for her husband that doesn't come back for years. And in all that time, these other men come into the palace because they want to win her hand in marriage, right? So you have these suitors, they're all in the palace, they're courting Penelope. Penelope holds them off. She knows she can't be that violent because it's a gang of horny, pretty lascivious men by the sounds of it. So she has to kind of welcome them, as is the ancient ethos of hospitality. But she also needs to keep them at arm's distance. So she kind of, they start inhabiting her palace for the course of years, and Penelope kind of wards them off. But these suitors come round and they start drinking all of her wine, eating all of her animals, and slowly they are dripping the inheritance and the value of the king's estate away. And they're kind of drunks, they're pretty lurid, they're hitting on Penelope, they're waiting for their chance. And Telemachus, who is the son, grows up in this. So his father leaves him, and he grows up within this awful climate of all these men vying for his mother's affections. And where we start the book is with Telemachus in a state of real collapse. I guess he's in his late teens or early 20s by this point. And the suitors are kind of befriending him in a way, saying, come on, hey son, come and drink with us, come and eat some of this fine meat and play these games with us. They are including him because they have to show Penelope that they're good to her son. They have to win her favor, so they're including him in this eating and drinking. But they're also eating and drinking away as inheritance. So it's this really difficult power dynamic for a young man to manage, which is something you might recognize for yourself, where there's an older man who's being inclusive and seemingly kind to you, but every single thing he does is actually a subtle humiliation. How do you get out of that situation? It's actually quite difficult to be able to name exactly what's going on so you can form a backbone and some courage to make a difference. So Telemachus has got uncertainty. Is my father alive or dead? Is he ever going to come home or not? Is he going to ward off or kill off these suitors and step back in as the figure of the father, the king, the husband? Or is that never going to happen? And again, the life lesson here is there's such an air of uncertainty that Telemachus cannot stand up and claim any sort of power in the midst of this unknown. Right? If his father's coming back, he's got more security. If the father's not coming back, how does he deal with that? But he doesn't even know, he can't set himself up. So he is, fortunately, we'll get onto this in a minute, he's visited by the goddess Athena. Athena is goddess of wisdom. She shapeshifts and incarnates in different forms. And she comes into the drinking and the carousing and so on and talks with Telemachus and says, essentially, look, this is no situation for you. You're suffering, and these layabouts are wasting away your future and your kingdom, and you're in pain, but you need to take a stand and you don't know what to do. So you have this moment of kind of coaching in a way. This goddess comes in and gives some really powerful coaching to Telemachus. And she says to him essentially, this is the first major point of the video today. She's like, you don't know what the situation is concerning your father, and you don't know what's going to happen in the future. The big circumstances that shape your life, your dad's at home and can raise you, or he's never coming back, you cannot answer that. But you must find a way to deal with that uncertainty. Otherwise, you're going to sit here sunken and collapse with living this ongoing humiliation. And Athena says to him, this is what we'll do. You're in this great unknown scenario. We're going to put a year on it. So you're going to time it from today for 12 months. You're going to put a year on it. And you're going to spend that year finding out all the best information you possibly can. You're going to commit to your most powerful course of action. You're actually going to travel to various parts of Greece to meet people who knew your father and see if you can get some up-to-date news on his whereabouts and his likelihood in coming back. Is he alive or not? You need to go on your own odyssey to find out about your father and just do your best to find the information. If you know he's dead, then you know. If you know he's alive, then you know. If there's still uncertainty, at least you did your best. And you come back after 1 year, and you make a declaration, right? If your father's back, he's the returning king. If your father's not back, you say, okay, here I am, I make a declaration right now. I don't know if my father's alive or dead, but we do need to move on. We are gonna run a contest, and the man who wins it can win my mother's hand in marriage. And I, as the son, will be willing to give my mother away to the most courageous and brave of all of the suitors here. So Athena kind of gives this advice to Telemachus, and he feels it and takes it on himself. Yes, I can give it 1 year. I can do my best amidst this uncertainty to make that decision and collect the information. I can show up, and then I can come back and I can take affirmative action about what the future is going to be regarding my palace, my inheritance, my mother, and one of you guys. And all of a sudden he's in an empowered mode, actually, in what happens next in the story. Well, it doesn't say, but I can imagine his spine is now erect, his chest is now big, his feet are planted on the ground, his belly is full, his breathing is deep, and he actually turns around to the suitors and gives them a good telling off and tells them what's going to happen next. And they were like, who are you, boy, you know, to turn around and speak to us like that? But Telemachus now can hold his dignity. So this coaching has helped Telemachus to stand there with strength and dignity and lay out the terms. I'm going to go and find out this, and in 1 year we're going to have this contest, and I will give my mother's hand in marriage away. You see, like, he was just a boy before, but now he's actually got some sense of decision and dignity around the future of his mother as well. So Athena comes in and gives him this initiation, and he takes it with both hands. He declares his course of action, and it puts him back in the driving seat. And why this is such a beautiful little story, you know, why don't I wait until I've read all the Odyssey to start talking about it here on video? I just wanted to hone in on this lesson because I've been coaching a number of men over the past year that are stuck in a very, very difficult decision, right? And sometimes the big life decisions, when we're young, sometimes it's just like, screw it, I'm gonna let the job go, split up with a girlfriend, and do this thing that my heart is called to do. But often when we reach our late 30s, 40s, 50s, it's more difficult to make big decisions because the kind of chain of people impacted by what we end up doing is much more complex. And we don't often want to do the impetuous kind of easy answer, just run away, run towards pleasure and the brighter future. Often we have to kind of bake in a difficult decision. And when we're faced with two decisions where we don't feel that we have the power to make a decision today or the clarity, we can often sink. And so I've worked with men who are in a career decision where they want to get out of what they're doing, but they cannot. And it keeps them kind of sunken and disempowered. And the same with a relationship. They're in a relationship which is half working, half not working. Half of them wants to get out, half of them wants to stay in, and they're not quite sure what to do. And that unsurety as a man is something that can really sink us, sink and collapse our posture, take us away from our strength and dignity. And so how do we come back to strength and dignity when the question is so complex and we don't have any clarity around it? Athena's advice, put a year on it, put 6 months on it. Find out all the information you possibly can, do the best shadow work you possibly can, find out about how that dream career actually works, and if it's not just a fantasy but something that's viable. Go on your trip around Greece and speak to the people who know about the positive and the negative side of your possible outcome. Get informed, puts you in the driver's seat, and then come back in 6 or 12 months. Did your relationship improve? Did it go to a deeper place? How does your work look now that you've taken some affirmative action? And then after 12 months, you take that decision. You stay or you leave. Same with your relationship. You stay or you leave. But at least you know that when you leave, even if it's the wrong decision, right? Because Telemachus could give his mother's hand away in marriage, and then Odysseus comes home after 13 or 14 months and, shit, Dad, you know, I just gave away the kingdom. I didn't know. Well, you need to put a timeline on it, and then you can just leave it to the gods, right? You can't live with that ongoing uncertainty forever. It needs to be bracketed. And then you can say, wow, you know, I gave her away. Was it the right decision? I don't know, but I took affirmative action. The rest is up to the gods. And then you feel your dignity come back. So if you're in the midst of a a decision that you cannot make. These passages from Athena really give a very nice structure and a thought structure and decision structure to regain vitality, right? So Telemachus then goes off to other parts of Greece, and he's just this young traveling boy, but he manages with Athena's mentoring to speak with honor and dignity and power and strength to all the different kings and wise people that he meets around Greece. And slowly he goes on this rite of passage where it's like, yeah, I'm not this collapsed little boy being humiliated in the palace anymore, but I'm stepping out, I'm traveling, I'm addressing adults, I'm learning how to speak my history and my intentions in this beautiful ancient way. You know, this is my name, this is my father's name, this is where I'm from, this is how we got here, this is the boat that we took, these are my men. And he grows in honor by doing that journey. Now, the second really interesting thing that I'm picking up from the book so far, and this is something we talk about a lot in Legacy, is what is this conversation with Athena he's having anyway? You've got this young boy becoming initiated, stepping into his power, and he has this relationship with Athena, who is a goddess, right? Who incarnates herself as different people. Does that actually happen? Is this a fantasy story? Or is the Odyssey giving us insight into how gods and deities actually work? What is a god or a goddess or a deity or a muse or a siren? What are these things? Do they really exist as externalities in the world? I can just pray and talk to Athena and then she'll come and talk to me? Or is it actually something more psychological going on, which is, well, there's no god or goddess outside of me, there's no muse outside of me, but I can host an internal conversation in such a way that calls up the presence of one of these powerful figures. And this is the way I understand the muse. So for the longest time and in common culture, we understand the muse as this beautiful woman who dances around, who's very inspiring, a little ethereal, hard to catch, but the artists of the world are just drawn to that energy. And because they watch the muse in action, their own inspiration and imagination turns on, then they create something really amazing. So we, as male, masculine identified artists, we see this kind of feminine muse in the world, and then we are drawn, inspired to create. Well, is it really the woman on the outside who's the muse? Or is it actually the faculty of inspiration and imagination that she triggers? And if I see the muse as the faculty of imagination and inspiration which lives within me, I just needed that beautiful kind of butterfly woman to turn it on. I take ownership actually of the muse back. The muse is the very faculty of my imagination. And because I see beautiful things in the external world, that gets triggered, but it's fundamentally mine, right? When I take on this, let's say more non-dual conception of what a goddess is, she's less this external thing and more just a representation of a personal resource that is already inside me, then you get a different code of understanding. So is there really Athena? Or is Telemachus talking to himself? He's having an internal conversation in a more empowering way. What should I do? He relates to female wisdom. But the female wisdom that's inside him, that's available to him, and he entables a conversation with Athena. So he's kind of not being coached by a goddess, he's self-coaching actually along the way. And so one of the very ethereal practices and considerations we do in the Legacy course, right at the beginning of the course, is to understand more deeply the way in which we talk to goddesses and muses and gods and archetypes in ourselves and take some more radical ownership. And what if I spoke to Athena? And this is, I mean, if you have some religious upbringing, this would make some sense. If you've been kind of atheist from day zero, it sounds a little bit nuts, and it can also be very vulnerable and uncertain to go in this direction. That's certainly the path I took. I went from non-believer to really considering this a lot more. But what if you would, you know, if you're religious, you might, under your breath, talk to God and have a private inner conversation with God. That's a known practice. Yeah, when I feel uncertain, I sit down and pray and I talk to God and I ask for answers. Where do the answers come from? God, the bearded man in the sky, or just a quiet knowing suddenly seeps up from within you? Because when you talk to God, it's like you can't really be big and arrogant. You acknowledge your limitation, you feel yourself as humble, you say that you don't have all the answers, and you beg for something else to come through you, right? So you make yourself small so that something bigger may come through. And you can talk to Athena in the same way, the goddess of female wisdom, ancient goddess of female wisdom. Athena, my love. Yeah, it feels good, right, to say that. Athena, my love, I'm faced with this challenge in my life. I'm not in my power. I've got this difficult decision to make, and the future is unknown. Speak through me. What do you know? What can you tell me? And you kind of internally make yourself humble and relate to this other intelligence. What is that other intelligence? An external goddess, or just an aspect of your own unconscious, which knows more things than your conscious mind anyway? So Telemachus shows us actually that, well, all this work that I'm reading from ancient Greece shows us the incredible interiority of an ancient Greek person. Imagine rowing out to sea, or walking some of the mountains alone. How do you imagine an ancient man going about his difficult life business? Conditions are harsh. No modern comforts as we have them today. You have to walk, you have to sail. Nature can finish with you. But it's really intriguing to contemplate that every ancient Greek with wisdom might be in a deep internal conversation with one of the many gods and goddesses at any one point in time. It might relate to certain people, certain figures more strongly, others less. But what a pantheon of internal resources that they could turn to and cultivate gifts from in their day-to-day lives. So I'll encourage you to contemplate this as you come away from this video. My sense is that every god, goddess, every angel, every demon, devil, right, is accessible through our inner conversation. And so who represents a resource that would be really beneficial for you at this point in time with the thing that you're working on?